Globalization and global are terms we often encounter today. These terms are associated with realities outside the territories of nation states. All countries are engaged in globalization. Very few, if any, societies are unaffected by this phenomenon. Because of this, we need to understand exactly what it is and, more importantly, how it impacts communication. How does globalization works? In simple terms, globalization is the process by which people and goods move easily across borders. Principally, it's an economic concept, the integration of markets, trade, and investments with few barriers to slow the flow of products and services between nations. There is also a cultural element as ideas and traditions are traded and assimilated. Globalizations have brought many benefits to people, but not to everyone. To help explain the economic side of globalization, let's take a look at the well-known coffee chain Starbucks. The first Starbucks outlet opened its doors in 1971 in the city of Seattle. Today, it has 15,000 stores in 50 countries. These days, you can find a Starbucks anywhere, whether Australia, Cambodia, Chile, or Dubai. It's what you might call a truly globalized company. And for many suppliers and job seekers, not to mention coffee drinkers, this was a good thing. The company was purchasing 247 million kilograms of unroasted coffee from 29 countries. Through its stores and purchases, it provided jobs and income for hundreds of thousands of people all over the world. But then, disaster struck. In 2012, Starbucks made headlines after a Reuters investigation showed that the chain hadn't paid much tax to the UK government despite having most 1,000 coffee shops in the country and earning millions of pounds in profit there. As a multinational company, Starbucks was able to use complex accounting rules that enabled it to have profit earned in one country taxed in another. Because the latter country had lower tax rate, Starbucks benefited. Ultimately, the British public missed out as the government was raising less tax to spend on improving their well-being. We might think of globalization as a relatively new phenomenon, but it's been around for centuries. One example is the Silk Road, when trade spread rapidly between China and Europe via an overland route. Merchants carried goods for trade back and forth, trading silk as well as gems and spices, and of course, coffee. In fact, the habit of drinking coffee in a social setting originates from a Turkish custom, an example of how globalization can spread through culture across borders. Globalization had speeded up enormously over the last half century thanks to great leaps in technology. The internet has revolutionized connectivity and communication and helped people share their ideas much more widely, just as the invention of printing press did in 15th century. The advent of email made communication faster than ever. The invention of enormous container ships helped too. In fact, improvements in transport generally, faster ships, trains, and airplanes have allowed us to move around the globe much more easily. What's good about globalization? Globalization has led to many millions of people being lifted out of poverty. For example, when a company like Starbucks buys coffee from farmers in Rwanda, it is providing a livelihood and a benefit to the community as a whole. A multinational company's presence overseas contributes to those local economies because the company will invest in local resources, products, and services. Socially responsible corporations may even invest in medical and educational facilities. Globalization has not only allowed nations to trade with each other, but also to cooperate with each other as never before. Take the Paris Agreement on climate change, for instance, where 195 countries all agreed to work towards reducing their carbon emissions for the greater global good. But what's bad about globalization? While some areas have flourished, others have floundered as jobs and commerce moved elsewhere. Steel companies in UK, for example, once thrived providing work for hundreds of thousands of people. But when China began producing cheaper steel plants in the UK closed down and thousands of jobs were lost. Every step forward in technology brings with it new dangers. Computers have vastly improved our lives, but cybercriminals steal millions of pounds every year. Global wealth has skyrocketed, but also global warming. While many have been lifted out of poverty, not everybody has benefited. Many argue that globalization operates mostly in the interests of the richest countries, with most of the world's collective profits flowing back to them into the pockets of those who already own the most. Although globalization is helping to create more wealth in developing countries, it is not helping to close the gap between the world's poorest and the richest nations. Basically, done wisely, in the words of the International Monetary Fund, globalization could lead to unparalleled peace and prosperity. Done poorly, to